When he first walked through the gates of Brookshire Academy, Liam felt as if he had stepped into another world. The school looked like something out of a storybook: wide stone buildings, glass halls shining under the morning sun, and a fountain in the middle of the courtyard where students laughed and tossed coins for luck. Everyone seemed to know each other, dressed in neat uniforms that somehow looked made just for them. Liam's was a little too big around the shoulders, the sleeves folded up twice so they wouldn't swallow his hands. He paused by the fountain, clutching the folder that held his schedule, a small map, and a photo ID that didn't look much like him. The face in the picture was serious, pale from the cheap camera flash at the Foster office. Around him, students moved quickly, talking about summer trips to Europe, new phones, or private tutors. Liam listened for a second, trying to find a rhythm in the noise, but it was a tune he didn't know how to play. He wasn't supposed to be here. At least that's what most people thought when they found out who he was. Brookshire Academy was for children of business owners, diplomats, and doctors. Liam was a foster kid who had bounced between houses until someone finally noticed his piano playing at a local community center. A charity foundation had sponsored him with a scholarship, calling it a talent opportunity. For Liam, it was more than that. It was his chance to belong somewhere, to build a life that didn't fall apart when someone decided they'd had enough of him. His first day was quiet. Most of the teachers were polite but distant. They spoke to him the way people do when they're not sure what to say. Kind but guarded. At lunch, he sat by himself, unwrapping a sandwich from a brown paper bag while other students crowded around the cafeteria tables. They were laughing about things he didn't understand. Who had the newest car? Which student had a personal piano coach flown in from Paris? Liam didn't have much to say about any of that. After classes, he found his way to the music building. It was the reason he had come, after all. The place smelled like polished wood and varnish. In the center stood a glossy black grand piano that almost looked too perfect to touch. He ran his fingers lightly over the keys, hearing their smooth click beneath his fingertips. It wasn't just an instrument to him. It was a voice, his only one, really, and when he played, it said everything he couldn't explain in words. He started to play quietly, a soft piece he had written in one of his old foster homes. He had composed it the night he learned his last family wouldn't keep him. It began gently, like the sound of someone taking a breath, then built into something strong, almost defiant. He lost himself in it, forgetting the time, the uniform, even the fear that he didn't fit here. The music carried him somewhere else. He didn't realize someone was listening until the door creaked open. A tall student leaned against the frame, arms crossed, a slight smirk on his face. He wore the same uniform, but his tie hung loose, his confidence filling the room. His name was Brandon. Liam would learn that later. "You play pretty well," the boy said, the compliment sounding more like an observation than praise. "Where did you learn?" Liam stopped playing. "Mostly by ear," he said quietly. "I had a keyboard at my last home." Brandon raised an eyebrow. "Not bad for someone who learned on plastic keys." "You're the scholarship kid, right?" Liam nodded, unsure what to say. The word scholarship carried weight here. It meant he didn't pay to be at Brookshire. It meant charity. It meant different. Brandon smiled again, but it wasn't friendly. "Well, welcome to Brookshire. I guess you'll make the competition interesting this year." Then he turned and left, the sound of his shoes fading down the hall. That night, Liam lay awake in his small dorm room, listening to the rain outside. He wasn't sure if Brandon's words were meant as encouragement or a warning. He had heard about the annual piano competition, the biggest event at the academy. Winning it could mean recognition, connections, maybe even a future in music school. It was everything Liam dreamed of, but now he wondered if he was already marked as the outsider. Days turned into weeks. Liam kept to himself, attending every class, finishing assignments early, and spending as much time as he could in the music room. Some students were friendly in passing. Others ignored him completely. A few whispered when he walked by. He pretended not to hear. What mattered was the piano. It was the one place where he didn't feel small. One afternoon, while practicing, the music teacher, Mr. Collins, stopped by. He was older, with kind eyes and a calm voice. He listened for a while before speaking. "You've got a rare touch, Liam," he said. "Not just skill, feeling. Don't lose that. This school values perfection, but music isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest. Liam smiled for the first time that week. "Thank you, sir," he said. Mr. Collins nodded, scribbled something in his notebook, and left. Those few words meant more to Liam than anything he'd heard since arriving. The school term grew busier. Posters went up announcing the upcoming piano competition. Students practiced in every corner of the music wing. Liam could hear them through the doors. Scales, concertos, runs so precise they sounded mechanical. He knew he didn't have formal training like the others, but he had something else. He played with heart. He practiced every spare moment, his fingers aching some nights, but he didn't care. It wasn't just about winning. It was about proving he belonged. Rumors started to spread that Liam might actually win. Some called him the underdog. Others rolled their eyes and said talent wasn't enough without pedigree. He didn't respond to any of it. He just kept playing. One evening, when the building was almost empty, Liam stayed behind to practice a new piece. The lights were dim, and the sound echoed softly off the wooden panels. As he finished the last note, a slow clap came from behind him. Brandon was there again, leaning against the wall, smirking as always. "You've been practicing hard," Brandon said. "Guess you really think you can win." "I'm just doing my best," Liam replied, standing. "That's all I can do." Brandon walked over to the piano, tapping one of the keys lightly. "You know, this competition isn't just about talent. It's about presentation, connections, image. People like me have those." "People like you." He trailed off, letting the silence hang. Liam felt his stomach tighten but said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence was stronger than anger. Brandon smiled faintly. "Anyway, good luck. You'll need it." Then he turned and left, his laughter echoing faintly down the hall. That night, Liam couldn't sleep. He thought about what Brandon had said, about image, connections, the invisible rules of places like Brookshire. He didn't have fancy clothes or family influence. He had only his hands, his ear for sound, and his belief that music could still mean something real. Maybe that was enough. A few days later, the list of finalists was posted on the music room door. Liam's name was there at the top. For a moment, he just stared at it, hardly breathing. His hands trembled slightly. Students gathered around, murmuring. Some looked surprised, others annoyed. Brandon stood at the edge of the crowd, unreadable. "Guess the judges liked your playing," Brandon said when their eyes met. "Let's hope your luck holds out." Liam nodded slowly. "Luck has nothing to do with it," he said quietly and walked away. He spent the next week preparing. Mr. Collins helped him polish his performance, giving him tips on stage presence and focus. Other students practiced with tutors or inside private studios, but Liam stayed with the old piano in the school hall. It was a little worn, but he didn't mind. It felt honest. Like him. On the night before the competition, Liam sat alone at the piano, the hall empty except for the dim glow from the overhead lights. He played through his piece one last time, letting each note settle into the air. He thought about all the places he had lived, all the families that had come and gone, all the times he had felt unwanted. And yet somehow he was here, in this school, on this stage, with something to prove not to them but to himself. When he finished, he sat for a long time, listening to the quiet. The piano, though old, seemed to hum softly under his hands as if it understood. He smiled faintly and whispered, "We'll show them." What Liam didn't know was that not everyone wanted to see him succeed. In the days ahead, choices would be made, cruel, deliberate ones, to remind him that Brookshire Academy didn't welcome those who came from nothing. But for now, under the soft light and the echo of his music, he felt hope. He believed that maybe, just maybe, this was where his story could finally change. The morning of the competition came faster than Liam expected. The air around the campus felt heavy, charged with excitement and nerves. Banners with gold letters hung in the hallways reading, "Annual Brookshire Piano Championship." Students carried sheet music under their arms and whispered last-minute reminders to themselves. For most of them, it was just another event to win or lose. For Liam, it felt like the most important day of his life. He woke up before sunrise, unable to sleep any longer. His dorm room was quiet except for the hum of the heater. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his hands. They looked steady, but his stomach told a different story. He rubbed his fingers together slowly, as if reminding them what they were supposed to do. His entire life, music had been the one thing that stayed when everything else left. And today, that was what he was going to hold on to. At breakfast, few people spoke to him. A few glanced his way, whispering, Someone had said he was the favorite to win, but others doubted it. "He's good, but not polished," he overheard one student say. Liam pretended not to care. He had learned to let words pass through him like air. He finished eating quickly and headed straight to the music hall, where the competition would take place. The hall was larger than any stage he had played on before. It had tall windows that let in morning light, and every sound echoed slightly off the walls. Rows of seats stretched out in front of the stage, where teachers, parents, and judges would soon sit. A line of contestants waited to rehearse for sound check. Liam recognized a few faces, students who had practiced beside him all term, and of course, Brandon. Brandon stood near the stage, laughing with two other students. He looked calm, too calm, like someone who already knew he would win. When he saw Liam, he gave a small, polite wave, the kind that carried more arrogance than kindness. Liam nodded back, then focused on his sheet music. He didn't want to waste energy thinking about anyone else. When it was Liam's turn to check the piano, he climbed the stage steps carefully. The black grand piano glistened under the lights. He ran his hand over the keys and felt a strange unevenness. One of the middle keys didn't press as smoothly as the others. He frowned and tried it again. The note played, but faintly, almost muted. He pressed a few more. Another key stuck for a second before releasing. His stomach sank. He turned to the stage attendant. "Excuse me," he said quietly. "This piano seems off. A few keys are sticking." The attendant, a tall man with a clipboard, looked bored. "All the instruments were checked this morning," he said. "It's probably just your touch." Liam wanted to argue, but he stopped himself. Maybe he was nervous and imagining it. He thanked the man and tried a few more notes. The sound was uneven, but not impossible. He told himself he could handle it. Later, as he waited backstage, he overheard Brandon talking in a low voice to one of the stagehands. He couldn't make out the words, but he caught the way they both laughed softly, glancing toward the piano. Liam felt a chill creep up his spine. He told himself not to jump to conclusions, but a small voice in his head whispered that something wasn't right. Contestants went one by one. Each performance filled the hall with impressive, flawless sound. Some students played famous concertos. Others played original pieces. The audience clapped politely after each one. When Brandon went up, he performed with confidence, almost theatrical grace. His notes were sharp, clean, and mechanical, like a machine doing everything exactly right. The audience loved it. When it was finally Liam's turn, he felt his heart racing. He took a deep breath and stepped out under the bright lights. The judges sat at a long table in the front row, their pens ready. The audience quieted. For a moment, Liam stood still, letting the silence wrap around him. Then he sat at the piano. The first few notes were fine. The melody began softly, smooth and familiar. But when his left hand moved down to the middle register, one key stuck again. It threw off his rhythm for a split second. A few people in the front row noticed. His chest tightened, but he kept going. Another note buzzed faintly. Then another key refused to rise fully after being pressed. His heart pounded in his ears. He could stop. He could raise his hand and ask for another piano. But something inside him, that stubborn part that had survived so much, told him not to. He adjusted his tempo slightly, weaving the broken notes into a new rhythm. Instead of fighting the faults, he made them part of the piece. The mistakes became echoes, tiny ghosts in the melody, turning it into something raw and beautiful. As he played, the hall grew still. The audience could sense it. This wasn't perfection, but it was real. Every note carried his story. The foster homes, the loneliness, the small hopes that kept him moving. The piano might have been faulty, but his spirit wasn't. He poured everything he had into the final movement, his fingers moving faster, his heart rising with each phrase. By the time he hit the last chord, his hands were trembling. The sound hung in the air like a held breath. Then silence. Long, complete silence. And finally, applause. Soft at first, then louder, spreading through the hall until it filled the space. Liam sat frozen, unsure if he had done well or just survived. But when he looked up, he saw something he hadn't seen before. People standing. Some were clapping with tears in their eyes. Even the judges looked moved. He stood, bowed slightly, and walked off the stage. Backstage, he leaned against the wall, catching his breath. His palms were sweaty, his shirt sticking to his back. He wasn't sure what had just happened. He had played through a broken piano, and somehow it hadn't broken him. Brandon was waiting nearby, his expression unreadable. "Nice improvisation," he said. Didn't think you'd pull it off. Liam looked at him quietly. You knew, didn't you? He asked softly. About the piano. Brandon's smile flickered just for a second, then returned. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, shrugging. It's the same piano everyone plays. Maybe you just hit it too hard. Liam didn't reply. He just walked past him, his steps slow but steady. Inside, a mix of anger and pride swirled. Anger that someone could be so cruel. Pride that he hadn't let them win. When the results were announced that evening, the hall was filled again. The judges gave long speeches about artistry, courage, and emotion. When they finally said his name, first place Liam Carter, he froze for a moment. The room erupted in applause. He could see Mr. Collins clapping in the front row, smiling proudly. Even some of the students who had ignored him before were cheering. Liam walked up to the stage, feeling lightheaded. As the head judge handed him the trophy, she said softly, "That was one of the most heartfelt performances I've heard in years. You reminded us what music is supposed to be." Liam thanked her quietly and looked out at the audience. For once, he didn't feel out of place. He felt seen. Later that night, after everyone had left, he returned to the empty hall. The piano still stood there, quiet in the dark. He pressed one of the keys that had stuck earlier. It worked perfectly now. Someone had clearly tampered with it, but it no longer mattered. He had played through it and won. He sat down and played again, this time a softer tune. Something gentle, almost like a lullaby. Each note floated into the empty space and faded away. He smiled to himself, remembering the faces in the crowd, the warmth of the applause, and the small, private victory that no one could take from him. Somewhere deep down, he knew this wasn't the end of the challenges he'd face. But tonight he had proven something, not just to the school, not just to the judges, but to himself. That no matter how many keys life tried to break, he could still make music. That night, after everyone left the hall, Liam stayed behind for a long time. The lights were dim, and the stage was empty except for the black piano sitting silently in the center. The applause still echoed in his ears, but so did Brandon's smirk. He kept wondering what really happened. He pressed a few keys again. They worked fine now. Every note was smooth, perfect, and clear. The same piano that had betrayed him on stage was now flawless, almost like it was mocking him. He sat there for a while, thinking about everything. The people who had clapped for him, the judges who had smiled, the students who had whispered. For a brief moment he had been seen, truly seen, not as a foster kid, not as a charity case, but as a musician. But now, sitting in the quiet, that feeling began to slip away, replaced by doubt. Did they cheer because he was good or because they pitied him? Did he win because of skill or because the judges felt sorry for the boy who played on a broken piano? Mr. Collins found him there later, still staring at the instrument. The teacher stepped softly onto the stage. "You should be celebrating, Liam," he said kindly. "You earned this." Liam looked up. "It didn't feel like I earned it. The piano, it was broken. I think someone—" He stopped himself. He didn't want to sound paranoid. Mr. Collins studied him quietly for a moment. "You think someone did it on purpose?" Liam hesitated. "Maybe, it's just—" "I heard things. And Brandon," the teacher sighed. "I know there's been tension. But what matters is what you did up there. You didn't stop. You adapted. That's what true musicians do." Liam nodded slowly. Mr. Collins placed a hand on his shoulder. "Go get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow the world will look a little different." But that night Liam couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the sticky keys, the faint smirk, the sound of laughter behind the curtain. He had worked so hard to belong, and still someone had tried to make him fail. The next morning, the story spread through the school like fire. Everyone was talking about how Liam had played through a faulty piano and still won. Some said it was heroic. Others said it was luck. A few even suggested it was staged for sympathy. He heard it all. In the hallways, in the cafeteria, whispered behind books in class. Brandon didn't say much that day. He smiled when their paths crossed, but said nothing. That silence felt louder than words. Liam tried to ignore it, focusing instead on his classes, but his concentration was gone. Music, which had always been his escape, now carried a small shadow. Later that week, Mr. Collins asked him to meet in his office. "I've been thinking about what you said," he told Liam, sliding a small folder across the desk. Inside was a note from the maintenance team confirming that the piano had been tampered with. Some wires and felt under the keys had been slightly loosened, just enough to cause sticking. Liam stared at the paper. So it wasn't my imagination. Mr. Collins nodded grimly. No, it wasn't, but we don't know who did it. I've reported it to the administration. They'll handle it quietly. Quietly? Liam repeated. Someone tried to sabotage me. Yes, Mr. Collins said softly. And you still triumphed. Sometimes silence is stronger than noise. You don't need revenge. You've already proved who you are. But Liam couldn't let it go. Not yet. He didn't want revenge, but he needed the truth. He wanted to know why. What kind of person looked at someone else's hard work and decided to destroy it? That afternoon, he went back to the music hall. Brandon was there, practicing alone. His notes were perfect as always, but they felt empty. When he noticed Liam, he stopped playing and looked up. Congratulations again, Brandon said. You must be proud. Liam didn't answer right away. Why did you do it? He finally asked. Brandon tilted his head. Do what? You know what I'm talking about. The piano. Brandon smiled, but his eyes hardened. You really think I'd waste time doing something like that? Maybe the piano just didn't like you. Liam took a step closer. They checked it. Someone tampered with it. Brandon's hands froze for a moment on the keys. Then he laughed softly. So what now? You want to tell the headmaster? Get me expelled? Liam shook his head. No. I just wanted to see if you could say it out loud. Brandon leaned back, studying him. You know, you're not one of us, Liam. No matter how well you play. This place isn't built for people like you, but you'll learn that soon enough. Liam's chest tightened, but his voice stayed calm. Maybe, but I didn't come here to be one of you. I came here to play. He turned and left before Brandon could respond. His hands were shaking as he walked through the empty hallway. He didn't feel angry anymore, just tired. Tired of trying to fit into a world that seemed designed to remind him he didn't belong. That night he sat by the window in his dorm, looking out at the dark campus. He thought about leaving the school altogether. The idea scared him, but also gave him a strange peace. Maybe he could go back to the community center where people cared about the music, not the image. But then he remembered something Mr. Collins had said. You adapted. That's what true musicians do. Maybe running away wasn't adapting. Maybe staying was. The next morning, Liam returned to the music building early. The hall was empty, sunlight spilling across the wooden floor. He sat down at the piano and began to play. Not the competition piece this time, something new. Something that began soft with small hesitant notes, then grew stronger, fuller, freer. It was a song about standing up again even when the world tried to trip you. Mr. Collins walked in halfway through and stood silently at the back. When Liam finished, the teacher clapped gently. That, he said, is the sound of someone who refuses to be broken. Liam smiled faintly. I guess I needed to remind myself why I started. The teacher nodded. Good, because you're going to need that strength. This school will test you, Liam. Not just your music, your patience, your belief in yourself. But if you keep playing like that, you'll be fine. After that day, something changed in Liam. He stopped worrying about who liked him or who didn't. He spent more time in the music room, sometimes helping younger students who struggled. He didn't talk about the sabotage anymore. He didn't need to. Everyone had heard the story and everyone knew he had played through it. That was enough. Brandon still practiced there too, but he never spoke to Liam again. Sometimes Liam caught him watching from across the room, expression unreadable. Maybe it was guilt, maybe envy. Liam didn't care. He had his music, his peace. Weeks passed and a new calm settled in. Liam started to find small moments of belonging. A nod from a classmate in the hallway, a teacher who asked him to perform at an assembly, a group of students who asked for his help with a duet. Slowly, the walls around him began to open. One afternoon, as he walked through the courtyard, he saw a few younger students gathered around the fountain. One of them was struggling to play a small melody on a keyboard for a school project. Liam stopped, knelt beside them, and helped fix their hand position. Try again, he said gently. When the notes came out smooth, the kid grinned from ear to ear. In that small moment, Liam felt something warm spread through him. Maybe this was what belonging really meant. Not being accepted by everyone, but helping someone else find their own song. That night, he returned once more to the music hall. The faulty piano was gone, replaced by a new one, shining and flawless. He sat down and played the same song from that morning, the one about standing up again. This time it felt different. It wasn't about fighting anymore. It was about peace, about knowing who he was no matter what anyone else thought. As the last note faded, Liam smiled to himself. For the first time since arriving at Brookshire, he felt completely at home. He didn't need approval or revenge. All he needed was the sound of the keys beneath his fingers and the quiet promise that he would keep playing, no matter how many broken notes life tried to hand him. The next few weeks in Brookshire passed like a dream, but not always a peaceful one. Liam's name was on every student's lips, and not everyone said it kindly. Winning the piano competition had made him known, but it had also made him a target. Some students congratulated him with warm smiles, but others whispered that the judges had only chosen him because they felt sorry for the foster kid. It didn't matter how beautifully he had played. Some people would always believe it was luck. He tried not to listen. He practiced more than ever, focusing on the feeling of the keys under his fingers. When he played, the noise of gossip disappeared. It was just him and the piano breathing together. Still, every so often, he caught himself wondering if success always came with a price. Mr. Collins noticed the tension. One afternoon after class, he stopped Liam outside the music room. "You can't control what people say," the teacher told him gently. "But you can control how you respond. Keep your head down and your heart open. The rest will fall into place." Liam nodded. "I'm trying. I just wish people could hear what I'm really trying to say when I play." "They do," Mr. Collins said with a small smile. "Some of them just aren't ready to understand it yet." A week later, the school announced that the Regional Arts Festival would be hosted at Brookshire. It was a big event, with guests from other schools, local reporters, and sponsors. Mr. Collins wanted Liam to perform again, this time in front of a larger audience. At first, Liam hesitated. "What if it happens again?" he asked quietly. "What if someone tries to—" Mr. Collins shook his head. "This time we'll make sure everything is perfect. And besides, you're not the same person you were then. You've already proven what you can do under pressure. Now you just need to play for yourself." Something in those words struck a chord. Maybe this wasn't about proving anything anymore. Maybe it was about reclaiming his love for music, not for approval, but for peace. The following days were filled with preparation. The school buzzed with excitement as decorations went up and students rehearsed. Liam practiced every night until his fingers ached, working on a new piece, on one he had written himself. It wasn't showy or grand. It was honest. The melody rose slowly like sunlight after rain, simple but full of feeling. One evening as he finished a rehearsal, he noticed Brandon watching from the doorway. They hadn't spoken much since the competition. There was no longer anger between them, just a quiet distance. Brandon walked in, his expression unreadable. "New piece?" he asked. Liam nodded. "Yeah, for the festival." Brandon sat down on a nearby bench. "You're still playing after everything that happened." "I guess I underestimated you." Liam looked up. "It's not about you, Brandon." "It never was." Brandon gave a small, humorless laugh. "Maybe not. But you made everyone look at me differently after that day. You made me realize that no matter how much money or training I have, I can't fake what you have." Liam blinked, unsure what to say. There was no pride in Brandon's voice and only exhaustion. For the first time, he sounded almost human. "I didn't mean to take anything from you," Liam said softly. "I just wanted to play." Brandon nodded slowly. "I know." Then he stood, brushed off his blazer, and walked out without another word. That night, Liam sat at the piano long after everyone had gone. He played his new piece again, but this time something in it changed. The melody became richer, deeper, no longer just about pain, but about forgiveness. The day of the festival arrived clear and bright. The campus was filled with visitors, laughter and the sound of music echoing from every building. The main hall was decorated with lights, banners, and flower arrangements. Liam stood backstage looking out through a small gap in the curtain. Rows of people filled the seats. Students, parents, reporters, and teachers from other schools. He spotted Mr. Collins near the front, giving him an encouraging nod. When his name was announced, his heart thumped hard. He stepped out into the light. The murmur of the audience faded as he walked toward the piano. It gleamed under the stage lights, perfect and still. He sat down, his hands hovering above the keys. For a few seconds, he closed his eyes and breathed. He thought about everything that had brought him here. The broken keys, the laughter, the doubt, the quiet moments of hope. Then he began to play. The first notes floated softly through the hall. It was a simple beginning, almost like a whisper. Then the melody grew, rising and falling like waves. His fingers moved effortlessly, not because of practice alone, but because he meant every sound. The music wasn't about proving worth anymore. It was about telling the truth. Halfway through, a faint creak echoed from the stage lights above. A few people glanced up, but Liam didn't stop. His focus was absolute. The audience could feel it, that connection between musician and instrument, heart and sound. The music filled every corner of the hall, wrapping around everyone like a warm memory. By the final note, the room was silent. No one moved. It felt as if time itself had paused. Then the applause began. Slow at first, then powerful, rising like thunder. People stood. Some even shouted his name. Liam stood and bowed, his chest tight with emotion. For the first time, he wasn't afraid of their eyes on him. He wasn't the foster kid anymore or the scholarship case. He was simply Liam, the boy who played because he loved it. When he stepped off stage, Mr. Collins was waiting with a proud smile. "You've grown," he said. That wasn't just a performance, that was a conversation, and everyone listened. Liam grinned, the tension finally melting away. It felt different this time, he admitted. Like I wasn't fighting the piano anymore, like we were on the same side. "That's because you were," Mr. Collins said. "Music has a way of forgiving us when we learn to forgive others." Later that evening, as the festival ended and the crowd drifted away, Liam stayed behind once more. The hall was quiet again, filled with the faint scent of polish and flowers. He sat at the piano and touched the keys lightly. His reflection shimmered on the glossy black surface, a boy who had once been unsure of his place, now standing on his own. He played one last time, not for anyone else, but for himself. The song was gentle, hopeful, like a promise. Each note seemed to say, "You belong, right here, right now." When the final chord faded, Liam closed the lid and smiled. The hall might have been empty, but he didn't feel alone. Somewhere in the quiet air, the sound of his music still lingered, proof that no matter how hard the world tried to silence him, he would always find a way to play on. The morning after the festival, the school halls were full of quiet talk. Everyone was still buzzing from the night before. Liam's performance had been the highlight of the entire event. People who had barely noticed him before were now stopping him in the corridors to say how much they loved his music. Some teachers patted him on the shoulder and said they were proud. Even students who once ignored him now smiled as he passed by. It felt strange. For the first time, people saw him as something more than a foster kid on scholarship. They saw him as a musician, someone with real talent. But even with all the attention, Liam didn't let it get to his head. He had learned that praise could fade as quickly as it came. What mattered most was that he had finally found peace with himself. Still, something unexpected began to happen. As the excitement from the festival settled, whispers about the old piano incident returned. Someone had told a reporter that the same boy who played so beautifully at the festival was the one who had been given a faulty piano during the school competition. The story spread fast, far beyond the school walls. Within a few days, people outside the academy started talking. Parents, music magazines, and even local news outlets praised his courage. Articles appeared online with headlines like, "Scholarship student overcame sabotage to win elite music competition." Liam didn't like the attention. He hadn't wanted anyone to know about that part. He hadn't wanted pity or fame. All he wanted was to play and to be heard for his music, not for what he had survived. But now everyone wanted to know more. Reporters came to the school gates hoping for interviews. Some students tried to get close to him just because of the attention. One afternoon, the headmaster called him to the office. Mr. Collins was there too, sitting beside the headmaster's desk. "Liam," the headmaster began, "you've brought great pride to this school. But the story about the piano, it's creating quite a stir." Liam shifted in his seat. "I didn't tell anyone," he said quietly. "We know," Mr. Collins said. "But people talk. Once a story like this spreads, you can't stop it. What matters now is how you handle it." The headmaster nodded. "We're conducting an internal review of the competition. It's time to make things right." For a moment, Liam didn't know what to say. "Does that mean you'll find out who did it?" The headmaster's voice softened. "We have a good idea already." A few days later, the truth came out. The student responsible for tampering with the piano, and those who helped him, were formally disciplined. Their names weren't mentioned publicly, but everyone at school knew who they were. Brandon was one of them. When Liam heard the news, his heart sank. Even though he had suspected it, hearing it confirmed left him with mixed feelings. He had wanted the truth, but not like this. Brandon was suspended from competitions and stripped of his leadership roles. Some students said he got what he deserved. Others whispered that the punishment was too harsh. Liam didn't feel happy about it. That night he went to the music hall again. The air inside felt heavy, filled with echoes of old memories. He sat at the piano and played quietly, letting his thoughts pour out through the notes. Mr. Collins found him there and sat beside him in silence for a while. "You're not pleased about the outcome, are you?" the teacher asked softly. Liam shook his head. "No, I didn't want him to be punished. I just wanted him to stop seeing me as the enemy." Mr. Collins nodded slowly. "Sometimes people hurt others because they're hurting themselves. It doesn't excuse what he did, but it explains it." Liam sighed. "Do you think he'll ever forgive himself?" The teacher looked thoughtful. "Maybe. But forgiveness begins when someone decides to learn from their mistakes. The question is, can you forgive him?" Liam didn't answer right away. He looked down at his hands, the same hands that had kept playing when everything else went wrong. Forgiveness wasn't easy, but maybe it was the only way to truly move forward. A few days later, he saw Brandon again for the first time since the punishment. It was early morning, and the courtyard was empty except for them. Brandon looked tired, older somehow. He walked up slowly, hands in his pockets. "I guess you heard," Brandon said quietly. "About what happened?" Liam nodded. "Yeah," Brandon looked down. "I'm sorry." The words came out low and uneven, but real. "I don't expect you to forgive me, I just wanted to say it." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of the fountain filled the silence between them. Finally, Liam said, "You didn't have to do it, you know. You were already good." "Better than most." Brandon gave a small, sad smile. "Maybe, but you had something I didn't. People felt something when you played." "I couldn't stand that." Liam looked at him quietly. "I don't hate you, Brandon. I just hope one day you'll understand that music isn't a race." Brandon nodded slowly. "Maybe I'm starting to." Then he walked away, leaving Liam standing by the fountain. For the first time, Liam didn't feel anger or bitterness, just relief. After that, life at Brookshire started to calm down again. The reporters stopped calling. The students found new things to talk about, and the piano incident faded into memory. But for Liam, everything felt different. The school didn't seem so cold anymore. Teachers smiled when they saw him. Some students even asked for his help with their own music pieces. He started mentoring a few younger students, showing them how to find emotion in their playing instead of just chasing perfection. One of them, a shy first-year named Caleb, reminded him of himself. The boy often stumbled over simple notes, his fingers stiff with nerves. One afternoon, Liam sat beside him at the piano and said, "Don't think about the keys. Think about the story you want to tell. Music isn't about showing off. It's about saying something only you can say." Caleb nodded and tried again. This time the melody flowed more naturally. When he finished, Liam smiled. "See, that's it. That's your voice." Moments like that made Liam realize something important. His music wasn't just about him anymore. It was about giving others courage, the same way Mr. Collins had given it to him. Months passed and the school year drew to an end. On the last day of term, Brookshire held a small ceremony to honor outstanding students. When Liam's name was called, he walked to the stage to receive his award for musical excellence. The applause was warm and genuine. As he stood there, trophy in hand, he thought back to the boy who had once walked through these same halls with folded sleeves and quiet eyes. He barely recognized that version of himself now. After the ceremony, Mr. Collins pulled him aside. "Next year we'll have a few new scholarship students joining," he said. "They'll need someone to guide them, to show them they belong. I was wondering if you'd be interested." Liam smiled. "Of course." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, he returned to the music hall one last time before heading home for the summer. The hall was empty again, the same way it had been the first day he'd arrived. He sat at the piano, letting his fingers rest lightly on the keys. He began to play softly, the same melody he had performed at the festival. But this time it carried something new: peace. The notes rose and fell like a calm voice, steady and full. He thought about everything that had happened, the pain, the fear, the triumph, the forgiveness. Somehow it all lived inside this song. When the last note faded, he stayed there for a moment, his eyes closed. The silence that followed didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like understanding. Liam stood, took one last look at the piano and whispered, "Thank you." Then he walked out of the hall, the sound of his footsteps blending with the memory of his music. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like he was leaving something behind. He felt like he was finally moving forward. Summer passed slowly that year, warm and quiet, like the calm after a long storm. For Liam, it was the first time in years that he felt truly free. No deadlines, no whispers, no competitions. Just long afternoons spent at the community center, where he volunteered to teach children how to play piano. The room had an old upright piano that was missing a few ivory keys, but to him it sounded perfect. Every day a few kids gathered around him, their small hands struggling to press the right notes. He would smile, guide them gently, and say, "Don't worry about mistakes. Music isn't supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to feel real." Sometimes after the lessons he stayed behind alone, playing quietly until the sun dipped low. His music had changed. It was softer now, full of peace instead of pain. It told a story, not of loss but of growth. One evening, as he was closing up the center, the manager stopped by. "You've got a real gift with those kids," she said warmly. "They look up to you." Liam smiled. "They remind me of myself. I just want them to know that no matter where you come from, you can still create something beautiful." The woman nodded. "You already are." As the summer drew to an end, a letter arrived from Brookshire. It was an official notice that he'd been selected for a music exchange program in Europe, a rare opportunity only given to one student each year. He read the letter twice, his hands trembling a little. It felt unreal. He ran to the small foster home where he was staying and showed it to Mrs. Turner, the kind woman who had taken him in since his early teens. She smiled proudly, her eyes soft. "You deserve this, Liam. You've worked so hard for it." "I just can't believe it," he said quietly. "Me of all people." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Why not you? You've turned every hardship into music. That's something special." The night before he was set to leave, he sat outside under the stars with his small keyboard beside him. He played a gentle tune, one that carried the feeling of home. Not a place, but a sense of belonging. For the first time, he wasn't afraid of what came next. When he arrived in Vienna, everything felt like a dream. The streets were lined with old buildings and the air smelled faintly of coffee and rain. The music academy where he would study was full of talent, students from all over the world, each with their own story and style. At first, he felt out of place again. Everyone seemed more confident, more trained, more polished. He spent hours in the practice rooms trying to keep up. But soon he remembered Mr. Collins's words. "Don't play to impress, play to express." So he did. One evening, the students gathered for an informal recital. Liam sat at the piano, feeling the same nerves he had felt so many times before. But when his fingers touched the keys, the music came naturally, honest and raw. It filled the hall, pulling everyone in, quieting every breath. When he finished, there was a long silence. Then gentle applause. Not the loud, flashy kind, but the kind that meant people truly felt something. Afterward, one of the professors approached him. "You play with emotion, not just technique," the man said. "That cannot be taught. It comes from life." Liam smiled faintly. "I guess I've had enough of that." The months passed, and Liam grew as both a musician and a person. He performed in small cafes, played for charity events, and collaborated with students who spoke languages he didn't even understand. Yet somehow, through music, they always connected. Back home, Mr. Collins kept in touch through letters. In one, he wrote, "The real test of an artist isn't how perfectly they play, but how much of themselves they leave behind in the music." "You've already passed that test, Liam." Liam kept that letter folded in his notebook. He read it whenever he felt uncertain. Toward the end of his stay, he received an invitation to perform at a prestigious recital, a final showcase for the visiting students. Each performer would share an original composition. Liam decided to play the same piece he had written back at Brookshire, the one that told his story. But this time, he added something new. A few extra bars at the end, softer and lighter, like a door opening. On the night of the recital, the hall was packed. The audience included teachers, musicians, and even a few journalists. As he sat at the grand piano, his reflection gleaming on the polished lid, he thought about everything: the broken piano, the laughter, the kindness, the forgiveness, and the hope. He began to play. The melody started low and hesitant, just like his first days at Brookshire. Then it rose, filled with strength and warmth. The final section was tender, like saying goodbye to a version of himself that no longer needed to be afraid. When the last note faded, the hall stayed silent for a long moment before breaking into applause. He stood, bowed deeply, and smiled. After the concert, one of the local musicians approached him. "That piece, it had something rare. It felt alive," she said. "Was it based on a true story?" Liam thought for a moment. "Yes," he said softly. "Every note of it." When he returned home months later, the school welcomed him back with open arms. Brookshire had changed, or maybe he had. There were new faces, new music rooms, and even a new piano in the hall. It was dedicated to him with a small plaque that read, "For the boy who taught us that broken notes can still create beautiful songs." He stood in front of it for a while, smiling quietly. Mr. Collins appeared beside him. "I see they didn't tell you about this," he said, his eyes twinkling. Liam shook his head, still staring at the piano. "It's beautiful. You've come a long way," Mr. Collins said. "You've turned every challenge into music. That's what real art is." Liam sat at the new piano and played a few notes. The sound was clear and full, but he could almost hear echoes of the old broken one too, the one that had started it all. He realized then that both instruments in their own way had shaped him. In the following months, he helped start a small music fund for underprivileged students. He called it the Second Chance Project. It provided free instruments and lessons to kids who couldn't afford them. Every time he saw a child smiling at the keys for the first time, he felt something light up inside him. Years later, when people asked him about his success, the awards, the concerts, the recognition, he would always tell the same story. Not about the trophies, but about that day at Brookshire when he was given a faulty piano and decided to play anyway. He would smile and say, "That was the day I learned that music isn't about what you're given. It's about what you make out of it." And when he said it, people always listened, not because the words were grand, but because they came from someone who had lived them. One evening, long after everyone had left the school, Liam walked into the empty music hall again. The lights were low and the room was quiet except for the faint hum of the night outside. He sat at the piano, his fingers resting on the keys. He began to play the same melody he had played so many times before, the one that carried his journey, his heart, his forgiveness. The notes rose softly, filling the room with warmth. When he finished, he didn't feel the need for applause or praise. Just peace. He looked at the piano one last time and whispered, "Thank you, for everything." Then he stood, walked out into the night air, and smiled. The stars above shimmered quietly, like notes on an endless sheet of music. And somewhere in that silence, his story, the story of the boy who turned pain into beauty, played on, forever.